The blood tasted like copper as it pooled in Nadine's mouth. Her husband's fist had just connected with her jaw, again. But this time, something different flickered in her eyes. Something dangerous. Something he should have noticed. "Please, Garrett," she whispered, her voice barely audible over his heavy breathing. "You don't want to do this." He laughed. That cruel, mocking laugh she'd heard 1,000 times before. "What are you gonna do about it, huh? Call the cops. We both know how that ends." What Garrett Calloway didn't know, what nobody in their wealthy Greenwich, Connecticut neighborhood knew, was that his wife wasn't just a quiet housewife who arranged flowers and attended charity galas. She was a third-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. A former national champion who'd walked away from competition 5 years ago to marry the man she thought she loved. The man who was about to learn the hardest lesson of his life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. Before we dive into this shocking story, do me a favor. Hit that like button if you've ever felt underestimated or judged unfairly. And subscribe because you won't believe how this ends. Trust me, you need to stick around for this. Now, let's go back 6 months. 6 months earlier, Nadine Calloway stood in the mirror of her marble bathroom, adjusting a silk scarf around her neck. Not for fashion. To hide the bruises. "Are you almost ready?" Garrett's voice boomed from downstairs. Even when he wasn't angry, his voice carried that edge. That warning. 2 minutes, she called back, her hands trembling as she applied concealer to the purple mark near her collarbone. Tonight was the annual Greenwich Country Club Gala. The event where Connecticut's wealthiest families gathered to pretend their lives were perfect. Where women wore smiles as expensive as their jewelry and men measured their worth in stock portfolios and golf handicaps. Nadine had become an expert at pretending. She descended the curved staircase of their $5 million estate, her emerald gown flowing behind her. Garrett waited at the bottom, looking sharp in his custom Tom Ford suit. For a moment, just a brief, painful moment, she remembered why she'd fallen for him. He'd been charming once. Attentive. Before the mask slipped. "Finally," he muttered, barely glancing at her. "Let's go. Senator Whitmore is expecting us by 8. The drive to the country club was silent except for Garrett's fingers drumming impatiently on the steering wheel of his black Bentley. Nadine stared out the window at the massive estates rolling past, each one a monument to American wealth and carefully guarded secrets. How many other women behind these gates wore scarves in summer? She wondered. How many smiled through split lips and blamed their clumsiness for broken ribs? The question sat heavy in her chest, a weight she'd carried alone for 3 years. The Greenwich Country Club glittered like something out of a movie. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing light across marble floors. A live orchestra played classical music while servers in white gloves circulated with champagne and caviar. Nadine had attended dozens of these events, but tonight felt different. Heavier somehow. "Garrett." "Nadine." A woman's voice cut through the crowd. Hadley Pemberton glided toward them, her silver dress probably costing more than most people's cars. She was the queen bee of Greenwich society, old money, older opinions, and a talent for making everyone around her feel small. "Hadley," Garrett's entire demeanor changed, his smile suddenly warm. "You look stunning." "Oh, stop," Hadley laughed, touching his arm in that way that made Nadine's stomach turn. "And Nadine." The comment landed like a slap. Several nearby guests turned to look. "I've been feeling a bit under the weather," Nadine said quietly, her rehearsed excuse. "A chill." Hadley's eyes narrowed with suspicion or perhaps satisfaction. "Well, you do look rather pale." "Garrett, darling, you should make sure she's taking her vitamins." Garrett laughed, that public laugh that sounded nothing like the one Nadine heard at home. You know Nadine. Always pushing herself too hard with her charity work. Charity work. The irony almost made her laugh. Her charity work consisted of whatever activities Garrett approved of. Nothing that took too much time. Nothing that might make her independent. Nothing that might help her escape. As Hadley dragged Garrett away to meet some hedge fund manager, Nadine found herself alone near the bar. She ordered water, not trusting herself with alcohol tonight. The fog in her head needed to clear. "You're Nadine Calloway, right?" She turned to find a woman about her age, maybe 35, with kind eyes and an uncertain smile. She wore a modest navy dress that screamed new money in a room full of inherited wealth. "I am," Nadine said carefully. "I'm Jolene. Jolene Vasquez. My husband just joined the club." The woman shifted nervously. "I don't really know anyone here yet. Everyone seems so connected." "That's one word for it," Nadine said, surprising herself with the honesty. Jolene laughed, a real laugh that cut through the artificial politeness surrounding them. "Can I be honest? This whole thing is terrifying. I grew up in Queens. My dad was a mailman. And now I'm supposed to make small talk about summer houses in the Hamptons and which private school has the best lacrosse program." Something in Nadine's chest loosened. When was the last time someone had been genuine with her? "The whole thing is an act," Nadine said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "Everyone here is performing. The trick is figuring out what they're hiding." Jolene's expression shifted, her eyes flickering to Nadine's scarf. "What are you hiding?" The question hung between them, dangerous and electric. Before Nadine could answer, a hand clamped down on her shoulder. Hard. "There you are," Garrett's voice was pleasant, but his fingers dug into her collarbone right where the bruise was. Nadine's face remained perfectly neutral, but Jolene's eyes widened. "I was just making a new friend," Nadine said evenly. "How lovely." Garrett's smile didn't reach his eyes. "But Senator Whitmore wants to meet you. Now." It wasn't a request. As Garrett steered her away, Nadine glanced back to see Jolene watching them, her expression troubled. That look would haunt Nadine later. Because Jolene was the first person in 3 years who seemed to actually see her. The rest of the evening blurred together. Nadine smiled and nodded through conversations about stock markets and vacation homes. She complimented the right people, laughed at the right jokes, played her part in Garrett's perfect life. But something had shifted. Jolene's question echoed in her mind. "What are you hiding?" The drive home was tense. Garrett's jaw was tight, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "You embarrassed me tonight," he said finally. Nadine's heart sank. "How?" "That scarf. Hadley commented on it. People noticed. I thought it looked nice." "Don't." His voice dropped to that dangerous register. "Don't pretend you don't know what you're doing. Trying to make people ask questions. Trying to make me look bad." "Garrett, I'm not." His hand shot out, gripping her thigh hard enough to bruise. The car didn't swerve. He'd learned how to hurt her without losing control of anything else. "When we get home," he said softly, "we're going to have a conversation about respect." Those were the words Nadine had learned to fear most. The conversation lasted 2 hours. By the time Garrett finally went to bed, satisfied that he'd made his point, Nadine sat on the cold tile of their guest bathroom, her ribs screaming with each breath. Nothing broken, he was always careful about that, but everything hurt. She stared at her reflection in the mirror. At 34 years old, she barely recognized the woman looking back. Where had Nadine Chen gone? The girl who'd won her first martial arts tournament at 16. Who'd put herself through college with prize money from competitions. Who'd been fierce and strong and free. She'd disappeared the day she became Mrs. Garrett Calloway. Nadine's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "This is Jolene from tonight. I got your number from the club directory. I hope that's okay. I just wanted to say, if you ever need anything, I'm here. No questions asked." Nadine stared at the message for a long time. Her thumbs hovered over the keyboard. Finally, she typed, "Thank you." It was the first time in 3 years she'd accepted even the possibility of help. The next few weeks passed in a familiar pattern. Good days when Garrett was pleased with her. Bad days when he wasn't. Nadine learned to read his moods like weather patterns, adjusting her behavior to avoid the storms. But something was different now. Jolene kept texting. Small things. Random observations. Funny memes. The kind of normal friendship communication that Garrett had systematically eliminated from Nadine's life. Nadine was careful. She deleted the messages after reading them. Never responded when Garrett was home. But those small connections to the outside world felt like oxygen to someone drowning. One afternoon, Jolene invited her to lunch. "I can't," Nadine said on the phone, keeping her voice low even though Garrett was at work. "Why not?" I have things to do." "Nadine." Jolene's voice was gentle but firm. "I've been there. Different circumstances. But I understand being afraid. My first husband, before Matteo. Let's just say I know what it's like to need permission to breathe." The admission hung in the air. "How did you get out?" Nadine whispered. "I decided I'd rather die free than live like that. One day, I just left. Took nothing but my car and my dog. Started over." Could it really be that simple? Nadine wondered. But even as she thought it, she knew it wasn't. Garrett had money, connections, power. He'd find her. He'd make her pay. Unless. An idea began forming in Nadine's mind. Dangerous. Impossible. But maybe, just maybe, possible. "I'll meet you for lunch," she said finally. "Next Thursday. But not in Greenwich." "Where?" "There's a diner in Stamford. Pete's Place. It's..." Nadine hesitated. "It's where I used to train." Thursday arrived with summer rain. Nadine told Garrett she was meeting with the decorating committee for the club's fall gala. He barely looked up from his laptop. The drive to Stamford felt like crossing into another world. Away from Greenwich's manicured lawns and colonial mansions. Back to regular streets where people worked regular jobs and didn't pretend their lives were perfect. Pete's Place sat between a laundromat and a bodega. The neon sign flickered, half the letters burned out. But through the Rain Street window, Nadine could see the familiar red vinyl booths and black and white checkered floor. She sat in her Mercedes for 5 minutes, just breathing. Could she really do this? Jolene was already inside, waving from a corner booth. Nadine grabbed her purse and ran through the rain. "This place is amazing," Jolene said as Nadine slid into the booth. "Very authentic." Nadine smiled. "It was my second home for 10 years. "Really?" Before Nadine could answer, a voice boomed from behind the counter. "Sweet jumping Jesus, is that Nadine Chen?" An enormous man with a shaved head and arms covered in tattoos lumbered out from the kitchen. Pete Macklin, owner, cook, and Nadine's former trainer. "Hi, Pete," Nadine said softly. "Hi, Pete." "Hi, Pete." Pete crossed the diner in 3 strides and pulled Nadine into a bear hug that made her ribs scream. She bit back a gasp. "Girl, you disappear for 5 years and all I get is hi, Pete." "I'm sorry," Nadine said, her eyes suddenly hot with tears. Hey." Pete's voice gentled, and he pulled back to look at her face. "Really look." His expression darkened. "Who did that to your neck?" Nadine's hand flew to the fading bruise she'd thought was covered. "I fell." "Don't." Pete's jaw clenched. "Don't you dare stand in my diner and lie to me, Nadine Chen." Across the booth, Jolene watched silently, her eyes wide. "It's complicated," Nadine whispered. "It's really not." Pete sat down heavily in the booth next to Jolene. "Someone's hurting you. That's not complicated. That's criminal. You don't understand. Garrett has money, connections." "Garrett?" Pete's face went red. "Garrett Calloway. That trust fund pretty boy who showed up here 5 years ago sniffing around you." Nadine nodded miserably. "I told you," Pete said, his voice tight. "I told you that guy was bad news. Too smooth. Too controlling. I saw how he looked at you, like you were something to own, not someone to love." "I thought he'd change," Nadine said, the word she'd never said out loud. "I thought if I was good enough, quiet enough, perfect enough." "Stop." Jolene reached across the table, gripping Nadine's hand. "That's what they make you think. That it's your fault. That you can fix it. But you can't fix broken men by breaking yourself." The truth of it hit Nadine like a punch to the gut. Pete leaned forward. "Listen to me. The Nadine Chen I trained could take down men twice her size. She was fierce. Unstoppable. What happened to her? She got married, Nadine said bitterly. No. Pete shook his head. She's still in there. I can see her. And she's pissed off. Nadine laughed, surprising herself. It felt strange. Foreign. When was the last time she'd laughed without calculating whether Garrett would approve? I've been thinking, she said slowly, the plan that had been forming crystallizing into words. Garrett doesn't know about my training. I never told him. He thinks I'm weak. Helpless. And? Jolene prompted. And maybe it's time he learned different. Nadine's voice hardened. But I'm out of practice. 5 years is a long time. I've lost muscle, flexibility, confidence. Pete grinned, a dangerous expression. So get it back. How? Garrett watches me constantly. Controls my schedule. Tell him you joined a book club, Jolene interrupted. Or a charity committee. Something boring that meets twice a week. Men like him don't actually care what we do as long as it doesn't interfere with their plans. Wednesdays and Saturdays, Pete said. Those are slow days here. The gym upstairs is empty. We'll get you back in fighting shape. Nadine looked between them. These two people who barely knew her but were willing to help. To fight for her when she'd forgotten how to fight for herself. Okay, she said. Let's do it. The training began the following Wednesday. Nadine told Garrett she joined the Greenwich Women's Literary Society, a real organization that Hadley Pemberton chaired. He'd barely looked up from his phone when she mentioned it. Climbing the narrow stairs to Pete's gym felt like traveling back in time. The space smelled the same, sweat, rubber mats, determination. The walls were covered with photos of fighters Pete had trained over the years. And there, in the corner, was Nadine at 22, holding a gold medal and grinning fiercely. That girl seemed like a stranger now. Don't get lost in your head, Pete said, watching her stare at the photo. She's not gone. She's just been sleeping. Time to wake her up. The first session was brutal. Nadine's muscles, dormant for 5 years, screamed in protest. Her flexibility was gone. Her timing was off. She fell more than she threw. But she didn't quit. Saturday's session was worse. Every part of her body hurt. But with the pain came something else. Something she'd thought Garrett had beaten out of her. Anger. Again, Pete barked as Nadine executed a throw, her form sloppy. She reset, grabbed Pete's GI, and executed the movement again. Better this time. Again. And again. And again. Until her hands bled and her vision blurred and something inside her finally broke open. She threw Pete, all 250 pounds of him, with perfect form. He hit the mat hard and laughed. There she is, he said. There's the fighter. Weeks passed. Nadine's body remembered what her mind had tried to forget. The movements came back. The strength returned. But more than that, something in her spine straightened. Some part of her that had bent and bent finally stopped bending. At home, Garrett noticed nothing. Or if he did, he assumed her good mood meant she was finally learning her place. Learning to be grateful for his generosity in tolerating her imperfections. He had no idea he was living with a loaded weapon. The moment of truth came on a humid August evening. Garrett came home in one of his moods, the kind that meant someone at work had challenged him, or a deal had fallen through, or his ego had been bruised. Nadine knew what was coming. She'd known for 3 hours, ever since his text, "Make reservations at Grayson's. 7 p.m. And wear something that doesn't make you look like you've given up on life." She wore a navy dress. Simple. Elegant. She thought she'd gotten it right. But at the restaurant, Garrett's jaw clenched when he saw her. "I said something nice," he hissed across the white tablecloth. "Not something your grandmother would wear to church." "I thought." "That's the problem. You thought. You're not paid to think, Nadine. You're paid to look good and make me look good." Paid. As if being his wife was a job. As if she was an employee he could discipline. The familiar rage and fear swirled in Nadine's stomach, but this time, something else mixed in. Something cold and calculating. Not yet, she told herself. Wait for the right moment. They ate in silence. Garrett drank 3 whiskies. His hand gripped her wrist under the table hard enough to leave marks. In the car on the way home, he started. You've been different lately, he said. Where are you going on Wednesdays and Saturdays? Nadine's heart jumped. Book club. I told you. I checked. The Literary Society meets on Tuesdays. He'd checked. Of course he had. There's a smaller group that meets separately, Nadine said, keeping her voice steady. We're reading American classics. What book are you on now? The Scarlet Letter. What's it about? The trap was obvious, but Nadine had read the book in college. She gave him a brief, accurate summary. Garrett's jaw unclenched slightly. Fine. But I'm going to call Hadley and verify. Okay, Nadine said simply. They pulled into their circular driveway. The house loomed above them, all glass and stone and empty rooms. A monument to Garrett's success and Nadine's prison. Inside, Garrett headed straight for the bar. Nadine went to the kitchen, her mind racing. He'd verify with Hadley. Hadley would say there was no small group. And then, her phone buzzed. A text from Jolene. Hadley just called me asking about a book club. I told her you and I have been reading together informally, using the Literary Society name loosely. She bought it. Laughed about how precious it was that we're trying to improve ourselves. Nadine nearly sobbed with relief. But the relief was short-lived. Garrett appeared in the kitchen doorway, his whiskey glass empty, his eyes dark with that look Nadine knew too well. You know what I think? He said softly. What? Nadine asked, her back to the counter. I think you're lying. I think you're sneaking around. Maybe meeting someone. I'm not. Don't interrupt me. He crossed the kitchen in 3 steps. I've been too lenient with you. Too trusting. That's going to change. His hand shot out, grabbing her throat, not squeezing, just holding. A threat. A reminder of power. This was the moment. The one Pete had prepared her for. The moment when it was defend yourself or break completely. And Nadine. Garrett's hand was on Nadine's throat. 3 years of abuse had led to this moment. But what Garrett didn't know was that his weak wife was actually a 3rd-degree black belt who'd been secretly training for months. What happened next would change everything. Time slowed down, the way Pete had taught her. In moments of crisis, the trained fighter doesn't panic. They observe. Calculate. Act. Garrett's grip on her throat was firm but not crushing. His body was slightly off balance. Weight forward. His other hand hung loose at his side. Amateur. I've been patient with you, Garrett was saying, his face inches from hers. But my patience has limits. You need to remember who's in charge here. Nadine's hands moved. One strike to his extended arm, a precise hit to the pressure point Pete had made her practice 100 times. Garrett's grip loosened instantly, his face registering surprise. Before he could recover, Nadine pivoted, grabbed his wrist, and twisted. Not hard enough to break anything. Just hard enough to send him stumbling backward. He caught himself on the kitchen island, staring at her with absolute shock. What the hell? Don't touch me again, Nadine said. Her voice was steady. Calm. She barely recognized it. Garrett's shock transformed into rage. You just put your hands on me. You. He laughed, but there was an edge of uncertainty now. Do you have any idea what I could do to you? About as much as I know what I could do to you, Nadine said. The difference is, I actually know how to fight. You just know how to hurt people who can't defend themselves. His face went purple. You think you're tough now. You think one lucky move makes you. He lunged at her. Nadine didn't think. Her body remembered. Sidestep, arm redirect, hip throw, and suddenly Garrett Calloway, 6'2" and 190 pounds of entitled rage, was flat on his back on their Italian marble floor. The impact knocked the wind out of him. He lay there, gasping, staring up at the ceiling. Nadine stood over him, her heart pounding but her hands steady. For 3 years, she said quietly, you made me feel small, weak, Like I deserved this. But I never deserved it, Garrett. No one does. You're insane, he wheezed. You're going to regret this. The only thing I regret is not doing it sooner. She walked to their bedroom, grabbed the bag she'd secretly packed 2 weeks ago, and left. Just like that. 3 years of abuse. Over in 3 minutes. Nadine drove to Jolene's house in Darien, her hands shaking so badly she nearly ran a red light. Jolene answered the door in pajamas, took one look at Nadine's face, and pulled her inside. I did it, Nadine said, and then she started crying. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere she'd kept locked away for years. I left him. I fought back and I left. You're safe now, Jolene said, holding her. You're safe. But even as she said it, they both knew it wasn't that simple. Garrett called 47 times that night. Then the texts started. You made a mistake. I'll forgive you if you come home right now. You think you can just leave me. Do you know who I am? I'll destroy you. And finally, you're going to regret embarrassing me. That last one sent chills down Nadine's spine. Because that's what it was really about for Garrett. Not love. Not loss. Embarrassment. Wounded pride. The next morning, Jolene's husband Matteo, an immigration lawyer with connections throughout Connecticut's legal system, sat down with Nadine. We need to get ahead of this, he said. Men like Garrett don't just accept being left. He's going to retaliate. How? Nadine asked, though part of her already knew. He'll try to control the narrative. Make you look unstable. Dangerous even. He'll use his money and connections to make your life difficult. So what do I do? Matteo slid a business card across the table. This is Lyra Brennan. Best family law attorney in Connecticut. She's expensive, but she's tough. And she doesn't lose. Lyra Brennan's office was in downtown Hartford, overlooking the Connecticut River. She was 50-something, with silver hair cut sharp and eyes that missed nothing. Tell me everything, she said after Nadine sat down. And I mean everything. The worst parts. The parts you're ashamed of. The parts you think make you look bad. I need all of it. So Nadine told her. 3 years of escalating abuse. The isolation. The control. The physical violence that never left marks where people could see. The psychological warfare that made her doubt her own sanity. Lyra listened without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad. And last night? She asked when Nadine finished. He grabbed my throat. I defended myself. Put him on the ground. Then I left. Good. Lyra set down her pen. Here's what's going to happen. Garrett will file for divorce and paint himself as the victim. He'll claim you attacked him unprovoked, that you're mentally unstable, possibly having an affair. He'll try to get a restraining order against you while painting himself as the wounded party. Can he do that? He can try, but he won't succeed. Because we're going to file first. Today. And we're going to include every documented instance of abuse, every witness statement we can gather, and every piece of evidence that shows his pattern of control. I don't have evidence, Nadine said miserably. I never took pictures. Never went to the hospital. You'd be surprised what counts as evidence. Lyra pulled out another card. This is Dr. Shiloh Mayers, therapist who specializes in domestic violence. She'll document your injuries and psychological state. That's evidence. Your friend Jolene who's witnessed his behavior. Evidence. Your trainer Pete who saw you 5 years ago versus now. Evidence. We build a picture, Nadine. Pattern and practice. Hope. That dangerous, fragile thing Nadine thought she'd lost. It flickered in her chest. How much will this cost? She asked. A lot. But here's the thing about bullies with money. They assume everyone else is motivated by money too. They don't understand when someone fights on principle. Lyra smiled. I've been wanting to take down a Greenwich Trust Fund bully for years. Let's call this one pro bono. The next 3 weeks were a war. Garrett hired Winston and Associates, the most aggressive family law firm in Connecticut. They filed first, beating Lyra by 6 hours. The petition was a masterpiece of fiction, painting Garrett as a devoted husband blindsided by his wife's violent mental breakdown. But Lyra's counter-filing was devastating. Detailed, documented, undeniable. Garrett's lawyers immediately requested a hearing, clearly expecting the judge to side with the wealthy, respectable businessman over his unstable wife. They were in for a surprise. Judge Tamsin Walcott had been on the Connecticut family court bench for 20 years. She'd seen every trick, every lie, every manipulation tactic wealthy men use to maintain control over their wives. She was not impressed by Garrett Calloway. The emergency hearing took place in a Hartford courthouse on a Tuesday morning. Garrett showed up with 3 lawyers, a Rolex, and an expression of wounded dignity. Nadine showed up with Lyra, the truth, and a purple bruise on her wrist that was exactly 4 days old. "Mr. Calloway," Judge Walcott said, peering over her reading glasses. "Your petition claims your wife attacked you without provocation. Can you explain these medical records showing she's been treated for accidents 12 times in 3 years?" Garrett's lead attorney, a man named Preston Whitaker, stood smoothly. "Your Honor, my client is not on trial here. Mrs. Calloway's previous clumsiness doesn't excuse her violent clumsiness." Judge Walcott's voice could have cut glass. "Counsel, I've been doing this for 2 decades. I know what clumsy looks like versus what abuse looks like. Sit down." Preston Saturday. "Mrs. Calloway," the judge turned to Nadine. "What happened the night you left?" Nadine stood. "My husband came home angry. He grabbed my throat. I defended myself using techniques I learned in martial arts training. Then I left because I feared for my safety. She put me on the ground." Garrett burst out. "She could have killed me." "Mr. Calloway." Judge Walcott's voice was ice. "You will speak when spoken to. Your wife is significantly smaller than you. She used defensive techniques to create an escape opportunity. That's called survival, not assault." The hearing lasted 2 hours. By the end, Judge Walcott had issued a temporary restraining order against Garrett. He was to stay at least 500 feet from Nadine at all times. He was prohibited from contacting her except through attorneys. Outside the courthouse, Garrett's mask finally cracked. "You think you've won?" he hissed as Nadine and Lyra walked past. "I'll make you wish you'd never been born. I'll take everything." "Mr. Calloway," Lyra said calmly, pulling out her phone. "I'm recording this. Please continue threatening my client in direct violation of the restraining order just issued 20 minutes ago." Garrett's lawyers grabbed him, pulling him back. But his eyes promised murder. Nadine had won the battle. But the war was just beginning. The divorce proceedings dragged on for months. Garrett fought everything, every asset division, every settlement offer. He wasn't trying to win. He was trying to punish. But something unexpected happened during those months. Nadine started living. She moved into a small apartment in Stamford. Nothing fancy, but it was hers. She got a job at a non-profit helping domestic violence survivors. She trained at Pete's gym 4 times a week, eventually starting to teach classes herself. And she made friends. Real friends. Not the carefully curated social connections from Greenwich, but people who knew her story and valued her anyway. Jolene became like a sister. They met for coffee every Saturday morning, laughing about things that weren't even that funny, just enjoying the freedom to laugh. Pete became her mentor again, pushing her not just in martial arts but in life. "You spent 5 years being small," he told her one day. "Time to take up some space." And slowly, week by week, Nadine did. The breaking point came 6 months after she'd left. Garrett had refused every settlement offer, clearly hoping to bleed her resources dry. But he'd miscalculated. Lyra had been building a case. And not just for divorce. "We have enough for a criminal case," she told Nadine in her office one afternoon. "Assault. Harassment. Witness intimidation. He made some mistakes threatening people who knew you. You want me to press charges?" Nadine's stomach clenched. Part of her just wanted it over. "I want you to have the option. But here's the thing, if we file criminal charges, this becomes public. Really public. Greenwich society will know. His business associates will know. Everyone will know what he is. Public. The word hung in the air. Nadine thought about all the other women at the country club. The ones who wore scarves in summer and blamed themselves for bruises. The ones who thought they were alone. Do it, she said. File the charges. The arrest happened on a Wednesday morning. Police showed up at Garrett's office, that gleaming tower in downtown Greenwich where he'd built his reputation as a successful hedge fund manager. His colleagues watched through office windows as he was led out in handcuffs. The story hit the local news by noon. By evening, it was trending on Connecticut's social media. #Greenwich abuse became a hashtag as other women started sharing their stories. Hadley Pemberton's daughter revealed her father had been abusive for 30 years. A judge's wife came forward. A state senator's girlfriend. The dam had broken. Garrett's lawyers immediately started damage control, trying to negotiate a plea deal. But the prosecutor, a woman named Octavia James who'd built her career on domestic violence cases, wasn't interested in deals. "We're going to trial," she told Nadine. "And we're going to win." The trial lasted 3 weeks. It was brutal. Garrett's defense team tried every tactic: character assassination, victim blaming, suggesting Nadine was a gold digger who trapped a successful man. But the evidence was overwhelming. Medical records. Witness testimony. Expert analysis of the pattern of abuse. And Nadine herself, calm and clear on the witness stand, recounting 3 years of hell. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on 3 counts of assault. 2 counts of harassment. 1 count of witness intimidation. Garrett Calloway was sentenced to 18 months in prison, 3 years probation, and mandatory counseling. His hedge fund collapsed within a week, investors fleeing from the scandal. His country club membership was revoked. His carefully constructed perfect life disintegrated. And Nadine was finally free. 1 year later, Nadine stood in Pete's gym, teaching a self-defense class to a room full of women. Some were there for fitness. Others were there for the same reason she once was, learning to fight back. The most important thing, she told them, isn't the techniques. It's remembering that you deserve to defend yourself. You deserve to take up space. You deserve to be safe. After class, a young woman approached her. Maybe 25, with nervous eyes and a turtleneck in July. "Can I talk to you?" she asked quietly. Nadine looked at her, really looked at her, and saw herself 5 years ago. "Of course," she said. "Let's go get coffee." As they walked to Pete's place, the woman started talking. About her boyfriend. About the small cruelties that were getting bigger. About not knowing how to leave. Nadine listened. And when the woman finished, she said the words someone should have said to her years ago. "It's not your fault. You're not crazy. And you can get out. Let me help you." 2 years after leaving Garrett, Nadine stood in a Hartford courthouse of a different kind, not family court, but a celebration. Governor Landry was signing a new domestic violence bill, one that Nadine had helped draft with other survivors. It expanded protection orders, created better resources for victims, and, most importantly, mandated training for judges and police on recognizing patterns of abuse. "None of this happens without survivors willing to speak up," the governor said, gesturing to Nadine and the other advocates standing behind her. "Without women like these, who turned their trauma into change." After the ceremony, Nadine drove back to Stamford. To her apartment that was small but hers. To her job that paid a quarter of what Garrett's allowance had been but gave her actual purpose. To her life that was real. She stopped at Pete's place for dinner. Pete brought her the usual without asking. Burger, fries, chocolate shake. "Saw you on the news," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. Looking fierce as ever. "Thanks to you," Nadine said. "Nah." Pete shook his head. "I just reminded you who you already were. You did the hard part." Nadine's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Hi, this is Marley. I saw your story online. I need help leaving my husband. I don't know who else to ask." Nadine looked at the message for a long moment. Then she typed back. "You're not alone anymore. Let's meet tomorrow. I'll bring friends." We'll figure this out together. Because that was the thing about surviving. Once you made it to the other side, you reached back for the ones still struggling. You became the help you wished you'd had. You became free. And then you helped others find their freedom too. So that's Nadine's story. From punching bag to fighter. From victim to survivor to advocate. Here's what I want you to take away from this. If you're in Nadine's situation, you're not alone. There are resources. There are people who will help. And you deserve better, not someday, not when you're good enough, but right now, exactly as you are. And if you know someone who might need to hear this story, share it. Because sometimes the first step to freedom is just knowing that freedom is possible. Hit that like button if this story moved you. Subscribe for more stories that matter. And drop a comment below. What's one thing you learned from Nadine's journey? Remember, you're stronger than you think. You deserve to take up space. And you never, ever deserve to be someone's punching bag. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the quietest people are the most dangerous. Not because they want to hurt anyone, but because they've learned exactly how to defend themselves. Until next time, stay strong. END